In 1984, a Detroit detective walked into the most expensive zip code in California, annoyed the wrong people with spectacular confidence, and accidentally became the biggest movie star on the planet. Beverly Hills Cop, directed by Martin Brest and released by Paramount Pictures, was not supposed to work the way it did. It went through multiple stars, multiple writers, and multiple near disasters assembled on a production process that ran on improvisation and stubbornness in roughly equal measure. The result was the highest-grossing film of 1984, a cultural landmark, and a franchise that refused to stay finished. These are the 20 facts that reveal how it almost didn't happen, why it worked when it had no business doing so, and what it left behind that nobody saw coming. Stick around for number 1 because it is visible in the final cut of the film, hiding in plain sight, and once you see it, you will never watch that scene the same way again. Number 20. The star who almost wasn't. Axel Foley had 3 faces before he had the right one. Eddie Murphy was not the first choice for Beverly Hills Cop. He was not the second choice either. He arrived at the project as Plan C after 2 of Hollywood's biggest names had already taken the script, shaped it to their specifications, and walked away. Plan A was Mickey Rourke before the project leaned toward comedy. Rourke signed a $400,000 holding deal to play the lead, but development stretched on, dates kept shifting, his contract expired, and he left without a single camera rolling. $400,000 to not make a movie. Plan B was Sylvester Stallone, who arrived with both hands and a completely different vision. He stripped out the comedy, hardened the tone, and rechristened the lead character Axel Cabretti, a name that sounds less like a Detroit detective and more like someone who considers property damage a personality trait, then began constructing an ultra-violent action spectacle with explosions and set pieces that were costing Paramount executives several nights of sleep. 2 weeks before filming began, Stallone looked at the projections and walked. His version of the script did not disappear. He salvaged it, reworked it, and turned it into the 1986 film Cobra. Beverly Hills Cop and Cobra share the same creative DNA. 2 completely different movies born from the same abandoned script, shaped by different men with different intentions. Murphy stepped in at the last moment, inherited a grim revenge thriller, and rebuilt it from the inside out through sheer improvisation. The film that shouldn't have survived contact with reality became the most profitable comedy of its decade. Number 19. The R-rated record breaker. Beverly Hills Cop was the first R-rated film in American cinema history to cross $200 million at the domestic box office, and it achieved that during its original theatrical run, with no re-releases and no inflation adjustments required to make the number impressive. Worldwide, the film earned over $315 million in mid-1980s money. It finished 1984 as the number 1 film in America. It beat Ghostbusters. It beat Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. A comedian in a varsity jacket solving crimes by annoying people until they confessed outperformed proton packs and a fedora with a whip in the same calendar year, and the industry had not quite seen that coming. The record for highest-grossing R-rated film in American history held for nearly 20 years. It took The Matrix Reloaded in 2003 to finally displace Axel Foley from the top of that particular list. The R-rated comedy record lasted even longer, 25 years, until The Hangover staggered into Las Vegas in 2009 and claimed it. Before Beverly Hills Cop, R-rated films occupied the risky shelf of the release calendar, a designation that studio marketing departments treated as a commercial handicap. The film didn't just succeed despite the rating. It rewrote the commercial logic of what an R-rated production could be, and Hollywood noticed immediately. Number 18. The budget that terrified everyone. Beverly Hills Cop was made for approximately $14 million. It earned $316 million worldwide. That is a return of more than 20 times the initial investment, achieved against a backdrop of last-minute casting, a script still being rewritten during production, and a star who had been attached to the project for 11 days before cameras rolled. For context, Stallone's version of the same script, the one that drove projected costs so high that Paramount executives were running damage calculations on napkins, was tracking significantly higher. When Murphy came aboard and the film pivoted toward comedy and improvisation, the production became leaner by necessity rather than design. Murphy's fee for the film was a fraction of what either of his predecessors would have commanded. Studio executives who had been quietly nervous about the entire enterprise found themselves trying to explain to shareholders how a comedy in Beverly Hills had returned one of the highest profit multiples in Paramount's history. The answer, which nobody had a satisfying framework for at the time, was Eddie Murphy, an improv culture, and a coin flip that landed on heads. Number 17. The script that wouldn't die. The story that became Beverly Hills Cop spent 4 years and more than 10 complete rewrites traveling from its first draft to the screen, and almost nothing from the original survived the journey intact except the bones. Screenwriter Daniel Bach wrote the first version in 1981 under the title Beverly Drive, featuring a Pittsburgh cop named Ellie Axel, a name that belongs on a library card, not a badge, investigating a murder in Beverly Hills. The tone was straight, gritty, and humorless. Ellie Axel was a procedural detective in a procedural thriller, and the story moved accordingly. Over the following years, as the project accumulated stars, directors, and competing visions, the city moved from Pittsburgh to Detroit. The name became Axel Foley, and the tone cycled from thriller to comedy and back again. By the time Murphy arrived, the screenplay had been touched by enough writers across enough years that the WGA arbitration over screenplay credit required a formal panel to untangle who had contributed what and when. What survived across all of it was the premise: wrong side of the tracks detective, murder investigation, Beverly Hills culture shock. Everything else had been rebuilt from scratch several times by different people for different stars until the right combination finally appeared. The story that reached cinemas in 1984 was the latest version of a script that had been written, abandoned, and restarted enough times to constitute its own small archive. Number 16. The coin flip that made the movie. The existence of Beverly Hills Cop, the highest-grossing film of 1984, came down to a single coin, an actual physical coin spinning in the air, deciding the fate of a franchise worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Director Martin Brest had recently been fired from War Games, his confidence damaged and his appetite for studio politics at a low. The Beverly Hills Cop project had already accumulated its long and turbulent history, and the whole enterprise carried the specific smell of something that could unravel quickly. Producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer were pursuing him with persistent enthusiasm, and Brest simply could not make the decision. He pulled out a quarter. Heads, he took the job. Tails, he walked away. It landed on heads. According to later reports, Brest had that coin framed and hung on his wall, which is either a tribute to the unpredictability of fate or the most anxiety-inducing piece of home decor in Los Angeles. Once aboard, the job tested him considerably. The film's tone shifted between action and comedy on a take-by-take basis, and on one particularly brutal day of shooting, he reportedly smoked 7 packs of cigarettes. Not 7 cigarettes. 7 packs. In a single day. The quarter cost 25 cents. The film it summoned into existence earned $316 million. Number 15. The Super Cop speech. The scene where Axel Foley storms into the Beverly Hills police station and invents an elaborate mythology about a secret super cop task force, talking at a speed that suggests his brain is running several seconds ahead of anyone else in the building, was almost entirely improvised. Murphy was exhausted the day they shot it. He famously avoided drugs and rarely touched caffeine, but someone on set handed him a cup of coffee. He took a couple of sips. That modest amount hit his system like a freight train that had misplaced its brakes, and mid-scene, he left the script behind entirely and began constructing a completely fabricated law enforcement mythology on the spot, delivering a preposterous backstory with the unwavering confidence of someone who knows they are lying and considers that a minor technical detail. Director Martin Brest had established improvisation as a production principle, so the cameras kept rolling. John Ashton, playing Taggart, looked down and physically pinched himself to hold the character together. Judge Reinhold, playing Rosewood, turned away with his jaw clenched, fighting a laugh that was trying to force its way out. Two trained actors reduced to emergency self-control techniques by a 23-year-old on a single cup of coffee, Brest kept the take. He kept nearly all of them. Number 14. The banana was actually a potato. The banana in the tailpipe gag, one of the most repeated comedy bits of the decade, was not planned. The prop that defined the scene was not supposed to be in the film. In the original script, Axel disables a pursuing police car by jamming potatoes into the exhaust. Potatoes are dense, mechanically plausible, and almost believable as an improvised sabotage tool. Potatoes are also not funny. During filming at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, the production couldn't access the kitchen in time, and nobody had the appetite for holding the schedule while someone negotiated the emergency procurement of root vegetables. The crew spotted a decorative fruit bowl in the hotel lobby, extracted a bunch of bananas, and handed them to Murphy as though this had always been the intention. The prop change forced a dialogue change, and the improvised line that followed, the cadence, the rhythm, the specific phrasing, embedded itself in the pop culture of an entire generation. The joke that would echo through school hallways across America for years afterward emerged from a hotel lobby fruit bowl and approximately 30 seconds of improvised instinct. The potato made logical sense. The banana made the film. Number 13. The audition that became a scene. The stakeout exchange between Taggart and Rosewood, the one about 5 pounds of undigested red meat and the digestive consequences of the average American diet, was not scripted. It was discovered in a casting room before filming had started. When John Ashton and Judge Reinhold came in to read together, Brest did not hand them lines. He told them to talk about anything and watched what happened. What happened was an improvised argument about diet, digestion, and the specific biological implications of red meat consumption, conducted with the committed intensity of two people who had strong and opposing positions and were not going to concede the point. Ashton went full grumpy pragmatist. Reinhold went full wide-eyed health evangelist, pressing a case he clearly felt was both medically valid and personally urgent. They bickered with the specific energy of people who have been stuck together long enough to run out of polite topics. Brest discarded the original stakeout dialogue and told them to recreate the audition argument on camera, almost verbatim. Two actors walked into a casting room, got into an argument about bowel movements, and accidentally invented one of the best screen partnerships of the 1980s. Number 12. Axel's boss wasn't acting. Inspector Todd, the permanently furious superior officer who spends the film's opening act describing exactly how much trouble Axel Foley is in, was played by a man who had never acted in his life. Gil Hill was a real Detroit homicide inspector when Martin Brest found him during location scouting. Brest walked into an actual police precinct looking for production context and found a fully realized movie character sitting behind a real desk, doing a real job, radiating the kind of earned authority that no casting call was going to manufacture. Hill had no film credits and no stage training. Brest's direction was reportedly minimal. Be yourself. Hill came back for Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Beverly Hills Cop 3, making him one of the franchise's most consistent presences across 30 years of sequels. After the films, he moved into politics, ran for mayor of Detroit, and won. Most actors chase larger roles after a hit franchise. Hill chased an entire city. The scene where he describes exactly how completely his chain of command has chewed him out lands with the weight it does because the man delivering it spent years in rooms where that consequence was entirely real and not scripted at all. Number 11. Serge was supposed to be nobody. Serge, the art gallery clerk with the indeterminate accent and the forensic ability to make every person in his vicinity feel slightly inadequate, was not supposed to matter. Bronson Pinchot was cast in a minor supporting role that was never designed to carry any weight at all. He walked into the audition with an accent that appeared to originate from a country that doesn't appear on any map but clearly has very high standards, and Brest responded immediately. The role began to expand. Other supporting parts were trimmed to make room for more Serge. Scenes were restructured around his appearances. The dismissive confidence that defines the character came from real life. Pinchot based Serge's mannerisms on a makeup artist he had worked with, taking that person's quiet condescension and architectural self-assurance and amplifying it to a register that the original person would probably have found offensive, then wrapping it in a mystery accent that needed its own passport. A throwaway background clerk became a franchise anchor. Serge returned for Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. decades later, still moving through every scene with the complete certainty of someone who has never once doubted that the room benefits from his presence in it. Number 10. The villain nobody expected. Victor Maitland, the ice-blooded art dealer financing a drug operation behind gallery walls, was played by Steven Berkoff, a casting choice that broke almost every convention of 1980s Hollywood villainy. Berkoff was not a studio film actor in the conventional sense. He was one of Britain's most celebrated and controversial stage directors. He was not the kind of name that appeared on standard Hollywood casting shortlists, where the standard action villain of the era telegraphed menace through aggression and theatrical snarling. Berkoff played Maitland as a man of such settled social confidence that violence was simply an administrative matter. The contrast between Murphy's kinetic improvisation and Berkoff's contained stillness gave their scenes together a specific and unusual charge. Two performers operating from completely different theatrical traditions in the same frame, producing a friction the script alone could not have generated. Number 9. Three men claim the same idea. Beverly Hills Cop had at least 3 separate origin stories, each told with complete conviction by a different person who believed they were the one who made it happen. Michael Eisner, then president of Paramount, claimed the concept arrived in 1975 after being pulled over in Beverly Hills while driving a battered station wagon. The officer who stopped him was polished, courteous, and unmistakably designed for a world that had nothing to do with battered station wagons. Eisner left the encounter believing there was a film in that cultural gap. Producer Don Simpson claimed he had developed the concept in 1977, a street-level cop, wrong background, wrong manner, dropped into the manicured bubble of Beverly Hills wealth. That was the pitch. Simpson delivered it with sunglasses on indoors. The third claim arrived from a different direction entirely. Lynn Franklin, a former undercover officer who had actually worked in Beverly Hills, believed the film had borrowed substantially from his 1976 memoir. He alleged that screenwriter Daniel Petrie Jr. had access to the book years before the script was completed, and he did not consider the similarities coincidental. He contemplated legal action in the mid-1980s. One studio president with a speeding ticket, one producer with an indoor sunglasses habit and a high-concept pitch, one real cop with a manuscript and a very specific theory about where Hollywood did its research. All three walked away, certain they had created Axel Foley. Number 8. The locations that couldn't say no. Determining which locations in Beverly Hills Cop were purpose-built and which were real depends almost entirely on how respectable the establishment in question was required to be. The actual Beverly Hills Police Department declined the production's request to film on their premises. Brest built a replacement on a soundstage, deliberately cleaner and more architecturally composed than any working precinct would actually be. The set did the culture clash work so the script didn't have to carry it alone. The art gallery where Axel reconnects with Jenny Summers was a real working gallery in Los Angeles. The production walked in and used the actual art, allowing the environment to do naturally what it would do to anyone arriving in a Detroit sweatshirt without an appointment. The strip club scene was real, with real working dancers fully on shift when the cameras arrived. The crew did not simulate that atmosphere. They showed up somewhere that already had it covered. The police department said no. The art gallery said yes. The strip club didn't change a single thing. Number 7. The TV show that almost happened. In 2013, someone at CBS looked at Beverly Hills Cop and concluded that what the franchise required was a weekly procedural with commercial breaks every 12 minutes. The network developed a full pilot. Brandon T. Jackson was cast as Aaron Foley, Axel's son, now working as a Beverly Hills detective. The pilot was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, the man behind Men in Black, and Eddie Murphy did not merely lend his name to a press release and stay home. He showed up, guest starred as Axel Foley, and signed on as executive producer. CBS passed on the series. Test audiences had reacted strongly enough to Murphy's appearance that the network decided what they actually wanted was Murphy in the show on a recurring basis, appearing regularly, providing continuity, anchoring the ratings. Murphy said no. He had created Axel Foley and had no interest in becoming a recurring guest star in a version of the character's story he didn't control. Without that commitment, the network's enthusiasm evaporated. Director Sonnenfeld later suggested that territorial disputes between CBS and Paramount had also played a role, the kind of executive positioning that has nothing to do with whether a story is good and everything to do with who gets to own it. Number 6. The sweatshirt. The Mumford High School sweatshirt that Axel Foley wears throughout Beverly Hills Cop was not a costume department invention. Mumford High was a real public school in Detroit, and the wardrobe team chose it for a reason so unglamorous it barely registers as a creative decision. They wanted Eddie Murphy to look like a person who actually came from somewhere. They found the sweatshirt, put it on the most commercially successful entertainer in America, and moved on to other concerns. The film became the biggest movie of the year. The sweatshirt became a problem. Mumford High started receiving orders, thousands of them from states with no particular relationship to Michigan, from people who could not have located the school on a map, who needed to own its merchandise because Eddie Murphy had worn it on screen and it had lodged itself in the visual memory of an entire country. A public school with a standard operating budget became, briefly and involuntarily, a national retail operation. Knockoffs appeared first. Licensed replicas followed. Decades later, official versions of the sweatshirt remain available for purchase, which means a throwaway wardrobe decision has been generating commercial activity for over 40 years. The costume designer grabbed it because it looked like something a real person would own. The rest of that story wrote itself entirely without her. Number 5. The sequel was greenlit before the film opened. Paramount Pictures greenlit Beverly Hills Cop 2 before Beverly Hills Cop had opened in cinemas. The studio had internal projections, they had test screenings, they had the accumulated evidence of what Eddie Murphy had done at the box office in the 2 preceding years. And before the public had been given the opportunity to confirm or contradict any of that, Paramount committed to a continuation. The decision was made on pre-release data and institutional confidence, before a single paying audience member had bought a ticket to the original film. The confidence turned out to be entirely warranted. Beverly Hills Cop opened and outperformed even the optimistic projections. The sequel entered production with a baseline audience, an established character, and a cultural conversation already running around the franchise. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was released in 1987 and opened to one of the largest opening weekends in American cinema history at that time. Preemptive sequel greenlighting has since become standard studio practice across the industry. In 1984, it was a significant institutional gamble on a film whose star had been attached for 11 days before production began, whose script was still being revised during shooting, and whose director had taken the job by flipping a coin. Number 4. The soundtrack takeover. The Beverly Hills Cop soundtrack was not assembled from licensed existing tracks dropped behind the action. It was a collection of original and commissioned material that arrived in cinemas as a coherent artistic event, and then climbed out of the film and into the culture at a speed that left the music industry briefly uncertain what had happened. The centerpiece was Axel F, composed by Harold Faltermeyer, an instrumental, pure synthesizer. No vocals, no lyrics, none of the conventional infrastructure that was supposed to make a single commercially viable in 1984. It climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, installing itself between power ballads and rock anthems with the confidence of something that had every right to be there. Glenn Frey's The Heat Is On peaked at number 2. Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters landed in the top 10, having been precisely synchronized with the film's opening truck chase in a way that established the film's energy from its first frame. New Attitude by Patti LaBelle broke the top 20 as one of the biggest comeback performances of her career. 4 songs, 4 charting hits, all from the same film in the same year. That ratio does not occur by accident, and it does not occur without a level of creative intentionality that the word soundtrack significantly undersells. The audience left the cinema with Axl's lines in their mouths and a synth riff already establishing permanent residence in their brains. Number 3. The Theme That Refused to Die. Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F did not stay in 1984. 21 years after it first appeared, the theme was revived, remixed, and deposited at number 1 on the UK singles chart by Crazy Frog, a digitally rendered animated character built around an engine-revving sound and a very high-pitched voice in the summer of 2005. The Crazy Frog version reached the top position in multiple countries and became one of the most commercially successful singles in British chart history at the time of its release. It introduced the melody to an entirely new generation with no prior knowledge of Beverly Hills, Detroit, or a 1984 action comedy. Children who had not yet been born when the original film was released found themselves humming a synth riff whose origin they could not have named. The riff had become culturally self-sustaining, detached from its source material and circulating independently. Faltermeyer wrote that keyboard line under deadline pressure for a film that was still being assembled around its star. The melody has outlasted the decade that produced it, the film that introduced it, and the music industry that initially doubted an instrumental could chart. It is still commercially active more than 40 years after it was first recorded. Number 2. The film that rebuilt itself in real time. Beverly Hills Cop was not so much shot as it was continuously improvised under pressure, with a script that changed daily, dialogue handed to actors between setups, and entire scenes reconstructed in the hours before cameras rolled. The production operated on a principle Brest had established deliberately. Improvisation was not a fallback when the script failed, it was the method. When Murphy arrived with 11 days before filming began, the script he inherited was Stallone's grim action version. The comedy had to be found rather than written, discovered in the space between actors, in the friction of unscripted exchanges, in the moments when Murphy left the text behind and the cameras kept rolling because stopping him would have meant interrupting something that was clearly working. Ashton and Reinhold built their partnership through the same method, constructing the texture of a long professional relationship through improvised argument rather than scripted characterization. The ensemble feels real because the relationships were built in real time. Number 1. The police chief was holding the script. Beverly Hills Cop had a script. It also had a production that was rewriting that script at a pace most studios would have treated as a psychiatric emergency. Revised pages were handed to actors between setups. Dialogue was reworked minutes before takes. The film was finishing sentences it hadn't started yet. When Chief Hubbard storms into the Beverly Hills police station to confront Axel Foley and the assembled detectives, actor Stephen Elliott is holding a roll of papers. They look like case files. They look exactly like the kind of administrative material a busy police chief would carry through his own department. They are not case files. They are his script pages. The revised dialogue had been handed to Elliott so close to the moment of filming that he had not had time to memorize his lines. Rather than hold the production for the time he needed, Elliott rolled the pages up, walked onto the set, and performed the scene holding a screenplay that was still being rewritten while the movie was being filmed around him. Martin Brest saw it. He understood exactly what those papers were. He left them in the final cut. In the same sequence, Ronnie Cox was delivering lines that were approximately 30 minutes old at the time of filming. Freshly revised, barely learned, performed with the committed authority of someone pretending they had always known exactly what they were about to say. Most productions rehearse for weeks. This one handed actors warm pages and pointed them toward a camera. And the fact that sits in the finished film, visible in every frame of that scene if you know where to look, is the most honest document the production ever created. A man holding the evidence of how the whole thing was made, preserved in the final cut by a director who recognized it as the truth. Beverly Hills Cop was built out of accidents, instinct, abandoned drafts, and a quarter that landed on heads. The script a police chief holds in his hands is the proof, and that is Beverly Hills Cop. 20 facts about a film that was never supposed to work the way it did, assembled by a director who flipped a coin, built around a star who arrived 11 days before cameras rolled, and held together by improvisation, a fruit bowl, and a real Detroit cop who went on to run an entire city. If you knew that police chief fact already, drop it in the comments. If you didn't, hit like and let the algorithm figure out the rest.